Still with us this hour from Columbia, South Carolina, criminal defense attorney John Mobley. John, thank you so much for staying with me. I want to look at the definitions of the first-degree manslaughter and the second-degree manslaughter, because these are the definitions that the jury instructions are predicated on, and this is what the jury has to decide while they're back there deliberating. So the first is first-degree manslaughter predicated on the reckless use or handling of a firearm. And the state must prove that the person died, that the defendant is the one who caused the death while the defendant was committing a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor offense, and finally, that the defendant committed the misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor with such force or violence that death or great bodily harm to another person was reasonably foreseeable. I want to go through the definition of second-degree manslaughter, but then, John, I want you to tell us what that means in plain English. So the second-degree manslaughter, the state must prove, number one, the death of Dante Wright, that the defendant caused the death of Dante Wright by culpable negligence, and the defendant created an unreasonable risk and consciously took a chance of causing death of great bodily harm. Those are the two legal definitions, again, captured in the jury instructions that then go to the jury. But John, what does that really mean? What does that boil down to as the essence of what this jury has to decide to determine if it's first degree, second degree, or acquittal?
Well, under the first degree charge, the main element of the conduct is reckless. I mean, in both cases, it's conceded that the officer caused the death of the victim in this case, but there are different levels of criminal mental intent, the mental state of the defendant. Reckless is a much higher degree. Reckless involves some degree of indifference to the risks involved. If you're aware of the risk, if you're aware of the harm it might cause, and you act in a manner that's indifferent. I think a good example is playing Russian roulette with a gun that's not loaded or maybe has one bullet in it, and and somebody gets shot and killed. Well, that's reckless. Even though somebody gets shot by accident, that's reckless behavior. You shouldn't do that with a weapon you think may be unloaded or loaded, and just a bad idea, and it's indifferent to the value of human life. Negligence is a much lower standard because it does not involve the same degree of intent. Under the statute at issue in this case, it involves some creation of the risk. That basically there needs to be some evidence that Officer Potter, created this risk by her own negligence. And quite frankly, if you apply it to the facts of the case, I just don't see either. This is a case, I think, and I've said it earlier, a year and a half ago, this case would have never been prosecuted. You have a situation whereby 3 officers were trying to effect an arrest on someone with an outstanding warrant. He was physically resisting arrest and tried to drive off with one of the officers involved in the car. And if you listen to the expert the prosecution put up, Officer Potter should have done nothing. He said use of a taser was inappropriate. I'm certain he did not mean to imply that she should have drawn her firearm intentionally. So if you can't use a taser and can't use a firearm, that means you can't do anything. So I don't think that really was going to go very well with anybody in this particular case. But from the standpoint of the elements, the key is the mental state of the defendant and the degree of knowledge and the degree of indifference and disregarding the information they had. A good example, when she talked about the training, and the prosecutor talks a lot about the training Potter had and how she did not follow the training protocols. She was trained on all these things all the time. But being trained on it is one thing, but I would have liked to have seen, if she was going to try to make an argument for recklessness, that she repeatedly violated these training protocols. If there was a history of repeated violations, that she was warned about it, she was advised, hey, you're violating safety protocols. These protocols are in place to protect people you're arrested and citizens. You're violating these protocols over and over again, and it's a problem. I think, yeah, when you have that knowing intentional violation of safety protocols, that's that reckless criminal conduct. But simply just kind of making this mistake because under stress you forgot to follow your training, it's a different ballgame altogether. And that's where I think the prosecution has a problem.
So, I think I look at it in terms of if the jury believes it was a mistake, a human error, then that's an acquittal, versus if they find criminal culpability for either of those charges, then it's going to be a conviction on one of those charges. And in fact, the defense during their closing used an argument to say when a pilot has an accident in their deaths, they're not charged criminally in terms of the pilot error that there might have been. But if you look at on the other hand, you hear about people who may have been in a car accident and they caused the death of 4 of our people and they say it was an accident, yet they can be held criminally liable. So how does the jury sort all of that out to decide either criminal culpability or human error?
Well, I think it all really comes down to the degree of the defendant's conduct. I mean, I would agree in this particular case that she was sued for wrongful death based on the negligence. Yeah, she's responsible all day long. But every mistake that results in harm does not rise to the level of criminal intent. If there's a car accident and somebody just misses a red light or runs a stop sign and somebody dies, well, yeah, running the stop sign or running the red light is a crime, but they're not charged with murder or manslaughter based on running the red light. You take that same driver and you have him, driving down the wrong side of the road in the middle of the day. That conduct is a lot more egregious, a lot more reckless. That conduct shows indifference to the safety of human life and the safety of others. So I think that's the analysis the jury is going to be using. They're going to be looking at whether or not her conduct, amounted to an indifference to the value of human life or safety. And ultimately, I mean, I don't see the prosecution that has really made that or had any evidence of that. I mean, it was clearly a mistake. They concede that, but simply making the mistake by under stress, drawing the wrong weapon. I mean, it's horrible. Don't get me wrong. It's a horrible, horrible outcome. And there should be some responsibility and some liability on her part for what happened. But an isolated mistake without any type of previous pattern or history or intentional conduct, I think is a very, very difficult sell for criminal intent.
And I think it's very clear if we look at our verdict watch clock, 8 hours, 57 minutes, clearly this jury and a lot of viewers have said it's either one or the other, absolutely, the conviction or the acquittal. Clearly this jury is still talking about that and they haven't yet made a decision. They haven't asked any questions today either. When we receive any information about that, we're going to bring it to you, of course, live.